I forgot to introduce the chair. That should have been the first thing. Just because ma'am was speaking, I didn't want to break the flow. So, I mean, I know Bava ma'am does not need any introduction, and we all are very well aware of her and her accolades. But just to put it very briefly in 3 sentences, I'd say that Professor Bava is a professor at the Center for European Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has been conferred with the highest honor of the German government, that is Order of Merit, and she's also a fellow of Asia, and she's also an associate fellow of the Asia Society since 2007. Thank you so much for being the chair, ma'am.
Thank you, Anshu. We start with Abhishek.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, Abhishek, you're audible.
Hello?
Audible, yes.
Very clearly audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I have this a small presentation because in online mode, we are not sure that whether I will be audible for the 10 minutes or not. So I decided to have a small presentation so that it also give me opportunity to be on time. So first of all, I will thank organizer to select my paper and give me opportunity to be here. And then I will surely thank chairperson, Bava ma'am, to give me this opportunity. And this is also a paper which I wrote first of all when I was in her class. So that's the thing. So from here I'm going to for the presentation. So here is my structure. I will first discuss security. I will try to have 1 or 2 slides of what we mean by security. Then the second and important portion, that is securitization. Third, how migration became a security issue, because migration actually is not a security issue. It is mostly about the economic phenomenon. If you look at the migration, 90% of the literature you will get about the economy, that push and pull factor, and then some of the time push factor becomes dominant and then it becomes securitization, something political matters come, but largely we look at from the perspective of economics. So how migration became a security issue. And then the third, because my paper talking about the 9/11, so the immediate reaction of the member states and the EU, and then I will go for the conclusion. So the very first thing, what is the security? So when we look at security, so I have taken some of the definitions. So the very first definition is that if you go to the Cold War era, that time the security means simple, that the protection of the boundaries and integrity of the state and its values against the danger of a hostile international environment. So if you look at these two terms, boundaries and integrity, boundaries means that external aggression. If some external forces is coming, capturing something and changing the boundary, that was the about the boundaries. And second was the integrity, that some internal threats that, so it was about the two threats, one external and then internal, but it was largely in terms of military. And second is the value. So the values at the time of the Cold War, one of the important values about the ideological orientation of the state. So one was the capitalist world, other was not a capitalist world, the socialist world, communist world. So they were also trying to have keep the idea of being in one block intact, so the ideological position of the state. So, but later on the security concept changed, and now security is being studied not just at the level of a state, but also at the level of individuals. The logic of human security, that means security will be interpreted as security of the people, not just territory. Security of individual, not just of nation. Because if you look at the idea, the state have this territory and the state go hand in hand, and the nation means the society, and the security through development, not through arms, security of all people everywhere, in their home, in their job, in their streets, in their community, in their environment. I would like to just add an example, very recent example. If you go and look at today's newspaper, one of the news in the Mint is that India is going to raise a matter on the international front that Chinese hackers created problem in its power grid. If you look, this is not about the changing the boundaries, but it is about the security of jobs, security of their need. Because the Chinese hackers issue with the power grid failure that happens in Maharashtra just few days ago. So this is the news in today's newspaper. So we can say that this security concept is changing. The cyber security and many things are coming. The hacking and other things which we are seeing today, and these are being the big issues. So this is security concept is changing now. Come to the next slide. To be classified as security, phenomenon has to fulfill some criteria. So we'll go for definition type of. So we must know about the criteria. So the first is there must be thoroughly defined and characterized threat. Second is the referent object of security, the object which is being threatened or in danger, and this is need to be protected should be clearly identified. Third, causality must be established, and for this, the logic that links the threat and the referent object must be clearly stated. Linking the threat and to referent objects. Also, it is a secondary source is got. So this is the one of these are the criteria that you need to be sure about this. Then comes the main theme of the paper and also this panel, the securitization. See, securitization is a process. It is and this process of making an issue a security issue means that which an issue not essentially to be security becomes a security one. So if there is issue that was not a, for example, I said in beginning that migration is not a basically security issue. It is mostly about the economic issues, but now it is being taken as a security issue. So securitization does not depend on nature of the issue or its objective importance, but through the representation in such a manner. Representation play a very important role, especially when we are talking about the migration. So the very so how a issue become a security issue? The very pronouncement of the word security by elites produces an hierarchical conditions, dramatizing the issue and presenting it as one that need to be placed in the bracket of supreme one, pushing something related with the normal politics or low politics into the security realm or high politics by making rhetoric of existential threat. So we all know that we know when it comes to security issue, we term it as a high politics, and other the cultural and other aspects are normally termed as a low politics. So when we, as we will go in details, we look at how this low politics area become a high politics area. So on the next slide, how migration become a security issue. See, if I go for a simple definition of migration, it is a permanent or semi-permanent change of residence by an individual, family, or a group. Okay. In international scenario, the economic condition, when we are saying that semi-permanent change of residence by an individual, family, or group, people change their residence because they find that some good economic opportunities are available in some other areas than their native areas, so they move. But in international scenario, economic conditions are just one of the factors that can act as a pull factor. See, it's a very important thing here that in economics we are mostly talking about the pull factor for the migration. Those factors are not that much important. But when we are talking about the international migration, push factor become very important. So people in international migration, you have to leave a country, but citizens cannot cross the borders without the permission of the state. And not only this, it is the state, not the market, at the destination that decide whether immigrants should be allowed to enter or not. And these decisions are frequently based on non-economic consideration. So for the state is not the economics. They will say that okay, we are happy or not happy with the person who is coming. They are not looking at the economic factor. So the permeability of border is related to sovereignty. Anyone crosses the border, and we all know. So I am just skipping this. So the demand of the introduction of the cultural entry criteria in the determination of social policy has been a practice in many of European countries. Because I am running out of time, so I am just going fast. So the thing is that what happened that in European countries there is already a mindset that is called the welfare chauvinism. That this we have a good system of the social policy, we have social security, and people are coming here not because they are going to help us to build our country, but they want to have the profit of our social policy, social system, social security system. So this is the welfare chauvinism. Second, it leads to a socio-economic stigmatization. What happens? The welfare chauvinists portray migrants as profiteers, free riders that are trying to easily gain the benefit from the welfare system of the community to which they do not belong. So what they are saying that this welfare system is for this community. We built, it is our history, our forefathers built, and you are coming from outside not to be a part of our economy, but to gain profit of our social security system, which is there. But this is only for us because it has been created by our forefathers, and we are paying for this. So this is the first thing. Second, what happens? The security border deficit term is considered against unwanted foreign intrusion. Okay, defense of physical and psychological security of economic interest of language and culture. See what happens that European nation, different European states are based on the culture, language. So what they're saying that if somebody who is not a part of this.
Abhishek, you have 2 minutes. You should start winding up.
Yes, only 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. So what they are saying that people who don't belong to our culture, they are not a part of our culture, not a part of our language, they are coming, so they are creating problem for us because our nation state, very nation state existence is based on this culture. So if there is a problem, there is a threat to the culture, so that will be a threat to the state. So just look at what happened. What is it? That it's a culture phenomenon, and that is being added to the criteria of the security. And what is it? The migrants are problem for the culture, so they are problem for the nation state. So this is a process that is transferring migration from this economic to security issue. Okay, so let's come to this. So what constitutes and the second is that the issue of migration is very much a question of otherness. Other is not an static one. Once again, I will like to put here this important point. So I'm running about that the other is not an static one. So one time someone is other, another time some other person is other. So what I think is not static things that okay, these are the threat. It's not like this is the threat and this is not for all the time. Sometimes they portray one group as a threat. Sometimes they portray another group as a threat. So next, coming to the next. See, if the up to 1970s, when the West European countries needed migrant labor, for example, I did another paper about the Turks in Germany. They welcomed the foreigners. Okay, that time the Turks, who were the Muslims, they were not the problem for them. But now they don't need this labor force that much, so now they have problem. The situation started after the 1970s. When economic situation changed, restrictive approach started. So just look, in 1950 to 60, Turks, they were welcoming Turks. From 1970, they said, no, okay, we don't want migrants, okay? And what happens that if you go at the 1980s and 1990s, that time, they were saying that, okay, 80s and 90s are decades when they were saying that we don't need migrants now. But the situation was changing in as a change of millennium. That time, a liberal immigration policy was there because they again needed workers. Okay, they needed workers because they are the aging society. So they needed workers. So they were saying, okay, let them come. But when the 9/11 attack happened, the response changes at once. So German plan for an immigration law, which would have allowed more immigration for employment, was suspended. Denmark, Italy, Portugal, UK, they all passed tougher law against illegal migrant. And in UK, new law, the Anti-Terrorism Crime and Security Act was introduced in 2001, November 2001. And then this war terrorism started coming. Okay. So
Abhishek,
and then you also, yes, last slide, ma'am, just 1 minute, last slide, 30 seconds. So you also reacted in the same manner, and then all happened. I will just go to conclusion. So what my paper concludes is that it is not the event of September 11 that initiated insecurity and uncertainty. It is not that after 9/11 at once they said, okay, the migrants are a problem. They were saying it, the migrants are a problem from the 1970s onwards. It was changing. The situation was changing. They were moving towards a more liberal policy. But what 9/11 did, that it gave us them a chance to go back again to the illiberal policy and securitize the whole issue of migration. So thank you. Sorry, I just failed to keep myself on time. So
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Abhishek, for giving us that overview. Next, it is Khushboo.
Yes, ma'am. So, good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, all of you. The topic of the presentation is Securitization of refugee crisis in Europe. And here I start. Europe has witnessed a massive influx of refugees from 2014 onwards, and Europe has been a history of illegal movement of people since the 1990s. They crossed the border and reached Europe. They crossed the Mediterranean Sea and reached the European border. And from then, the Mediterranean has become one of the most dangerous border zone in the world. And in 2015, if we see more than a million of people flew from their country, were refugees and migrants, entered the EU through illegal routes, and they created political, economic, security crisis to the Europe. Challenges. If we see the word crisis is very disputable in nature, there was a huge debate on flow of refugee in Europe. What kind of crisis it was? Was it a refugee crisis? Was it a crisis? And what kind of crisis Europe has witnessed? Has Europe witnessed a collapse of border regime? Was it a crisis against the political idea of Europe? Is it created social disparity, economic burden, and the threat to European security? So when we see the refugee crisis leads to economic crisis, it's also countered a security crisis in Europe after witnessing horrifying terrorist attack in Paris and Brussels. And in geopolitical environment shifted the understanding of refugee as a radicalization of Europe, Islamic extremism, hate crimes, and the rise of political national popular front parties and anti-immigrant groups spread the notion of xenophobia and Islamophobia approach in Europe. Now we have to understand who is refugee first. So according to 1951 Refugee Convention, a refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. Now we have to be understand demarcation between refugee and migrant, and we can understand the two factors. There is a push factor and a pull factor. The push factor describes the war, conflict, persecution, poverty in Syria, instability and disruption in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and Libya produced a huge number of displaced people and refugees. Whereas we see the pull factor describe the person choice and decision to leave their home country to come Europe rather than to go any other place because of the geographical location and a better infrastructure for migrant and substantial and model uh, the European Union asylum system. So, what is the refugee crisis? If you see the over the past few years, Europe has witnessed a destination for masses of people trying to escape from war, political turmoil, and poverty in Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And during 2015 and 16, nearly 1 million people, migrant refugee, passed through the Greece island and mainly towards Central and Northern Europe. And over the last 4 years, about 3.5 million people have applied for asylum in the EU 28 countries, member states. And on the paper, this number appears very manageable for a continent of 500 inhabitants. But the influx of uninvited people from the distant land and foreign culture created a new social, political, and economic pressure in a continent. So why we call it? It created a crisis like a situation for the European Union. So if we see, the EU has ratified the United Nations 1951 Geneva Convention, which is related to status of refugee, which is based on a status and right-based instrument and is underpinned by a number of fundamental principles, most notably non-discrimination, non-penalization, non-refoulement. This non-refoulement provides that no one shall expel or return a refugee against his or her will in any manner whatsoever territory where he or she fears threat to life or freedom. So because you has signed the UN 1951 convention, UN cannot send back to the refugee to their home country where they have fear of threat and fear of freedom. And the inflow of refugees in Europe left a significant impact on rise of populism, especially the right-wing political opinion. Many European this country disputes these political parties perceive the Muslim refugee as a threat to their safety, and they consider that the arrival of foreigners cause all the problem in the country. They use the refugee problem as a political agenda to benefit themselves in a building of social dissatisfaction, so they could gain broader political support. And as a result, anxiety, depression, hate against the refugees started appearing the former Islamophobia in entire Europe. So the refugee problem turned into the crisis because unprepared European Union failed to control the situation alone as member country denied supporting collectively, and the member country were well aware that if the refugee reach to their country, they have to serve adequate reception and assistance to them, and particularly to those who need special needs. In true sense, the refugee problem become a crisis due to the unfair, unequal amount of asylum application fall on a small number of member states. In order to respond in order to address the refugee crisis, EU response towards it and through the reform and policy, the reform of the Dublin system in May 2016, Commission proposed a new reform in the Dublin system for asylum application to better manage of migration flow and provide adequate protection in those in need protection. And it was based on the principle of solidarity and fair sharing of responsibility of the refugee and migrants among member states. In September 2020, the new pact adopted on migrant asylum stated that no member state should shoulder a disproportionate responsibility, and all the member states should contribute to solidarity on the constant basis. And next, we see the transformation of Frontex, European Border and Coast Guard Agency, which is also known as the Frontex, aim to control illegal migration, whether they have refugee status. If they are not fulfilling all the rules and conditions, they are not allowed entering Europe, and they will send back from the border. And on 13 November 2019, European Parliament and Council came up with a new framework to achieving a strategy target to having a capacity of 10,000 operational staff and adequate support from the member state to protect the external border to fight against cross border crime. And the EU hotspot approach was set up to help the member state receiving the most refugees. The European Asylum Support Office, Frontex, Europol, and Eurojust were called to cooperate and work together with a member state to help them and fulfill their requirements under the European Union law. And so they can check identity, register them, and take the fingerprints of incoming refugees and migrants. It also works on the temporary relocation of those migrants who need international protection, can shift from frontline members state to other EU state where their asylum application will be proceed. And the next is the EU-Turkey agreement. The EU signed a Turkey agreement on 18 March 2016, and according to this agreement, or illegal refugee, migrant, asylum seeker arrived from Turkey to Greece island and whose asylum application is not acceptable would return to Turkey. So in conclusion, I'll say now the time we see there is no refugee crisis has been faced by Europe past year, and however illegal movement of people is still ongoing, but the number is significantly very less and very slower than 2015 and 16 crisis. If we see in 2019 data, 27,301 people arrived in Italy, Greece, Spain, Cyprus, and Malta. And meanwhile, crossing the routes, 584 people reported dead and missing due to this dangerous sea and land routes. So, in the end, I'll say it requires fair burden sharing and consensus among the countries to cooperate and find a coherent way to address the crisis. The EU need a comprehensive and sustainable solution to prevent from the future crisis, and it need to come up with a broader policy strategy and have to allow to ensure the security and safety to their citizens under respect of human rights and law and refugee convention. The EU needs a common asylum policy with clear laws instead of practice of closing the borders and forcing the national quotas. It should be improved, standardized, and speed up the process of determining asylum applications. And I say instead of seeing the refugee crisis as a threat to Europe, we need to see as an opportunity. Respect of human rights is the core value of the European Union identity, and I guess the European Union needs to maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Khushboo. Thank you also for staying to time and sparing us some more minutes from your own, which I think is fantastic. Very nice. We next have Adarsh. Adarsh Mishra. I think Adarsh was here and I don't see him on the screen now.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you're audible. Thank you, Adarsh.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon to all. And I would like to thank Professor Baswati Sarkar for giving me this opportunity to present my paper. I would like to speak on securitization of migration during the refugee crisis, right? So when it comes to the definition of refugee, in 1961, the Geneva Convention defines a refugee or any person owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted is outside of one's country and is willing to avail itself for for protection of that country. Migration. Then why the refugee crisis, happened? Because after the Cold War, during the after the Cold War, Bill Clinton was the president of United States of America, and his policy uh, towards the Middle East to promotion of democracy. Why he promoted democracy? Because he just want to exploit the resources that are there in the Middle East. So in a way, the US and its allies means the European countries, mainly the Western European countries. The Western European countries are the my videos is not visible. I don't know why. I'm trying to open it, but so the Bill Clinton policy was policy towards the West Asia and the Middle East to exploit the resources of the West Asia it's to exploit the resources of the West Asian countries such as Syria, Israel, and as we all know that the U.S. policy towards Israel is, U.S. is more favoring the Israel. And in 2000, after that, when the Bush administration and the war on World Trade Center, there was a terrorist attack took place. For that, Bush administration launched a war on terror, and that war on terror begins in 2001, and thereafter in 2003, U.S. invaded in Iraq and invaded in Iraq. So after that, Barack Obama came into power, and his policy remains the same. He was a Democrat, and his policy remains the same. His policy was to promote democracy, and so promotion of democracy is the reason. There is a theory called democratic peace theory in international relations. According to this theory, democracy do not fight each other. So this was basically the policy of the United States. So why the refugee crisis occurred? Refugee crisis occurred because there was a civil war, take place in 2011 to 2015, whatever, in the timeline. So there was a civil war, conflict. This area became more conflict-driven area where the people. So there's a push factor and pull factor. People migrated from there, from Europe, from West Asia to basically the Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, and basically the Syrian and Syrian refugees. They went to the European Union through Mediterranean routes, and they lived there. And as far as the European Union's response to the refugee crisis are concerned, they are initially some of the countries are more favorable to the refugees, and some of them are not. Like for instance, the Germany and the Sweden allowed refugees to allowed refugees to live in their country. But when it comes to Visegrad countries like Poland, like Hungary, like Austria, they didn't allow the refugees to come into their country. So what is securitization? The process through which an issue is securitized. It is constructed as a matter of security, and as something that made to be threatened with extraordinary measures. That is called a securitization. And when it securitization, issues identified as potential existential threat, and referent object that is being threatened, and that needs to be protected. the target of the speech act it needs to be persuaded to accept the issues as a security issues. So the most of the European countries like Central and Eastern European countries, they have not allowed migrants to their countries. Because why they don't allow? Because of the security threat. They feel that the Islam is a threat to the culture of Europe, because Europe is a kind of homogeneous society. They don't believe in heterogeneous society. So what are the problems? They thought they see migrants are a threat to their public order. Their cultural migrants are threat to their cultural identity. Migrants are threat to their threat towards their market labor. According to them, they thought that the migrants will take over their jobs. So these are the concerns that most of the European countries have when it comes to migration. So the securitization, they have secured their borders, like Visegrad countries. They fence their borders. They patrolled their borders. They not allowed migrants to let into their countries because they feel migrants threat to their culture, public order, and instability. They see Islam as a terrorist. So these are the issues related to securitization of migration. With this, I would like to end my presentation.
Thank you, Adarsh. Thank you also for keeping well in time and bringing out the key points in the discussion. We now have Sharat Poornima.
Yes, ma'am. Should I start, ma'am?
Yes, please, do start.
A very good afternoon to all of you. My topic is on the politics of immigration in Europe. Europe in the last few decades has been beset with many challenges, of which immigration has been of particular concern to us today. Immigration flows in Europe in the past has continued unabated mainly through family reunification, political asylum, which has been granted by developed countries under both the Geneva Convention and their respective domestic laws, and the illegal immigration of labor. The illegal immigration of labor has actually led many states to securitize their borders through various regularization and deportation programs, such as strict visa norms and lengthy asylum procedures. The recent discourse on immigration has been shaped by the refugee crisis of 2016, which has been unleashed by the Arab Spring Revolution in the West Asia and North Africa region. The third world has been mainly inclined to the developed world in the wake of war, political instability, the breakdown of law and order, oppression and expulsion of ethnic minority, high population growth rate, and wide income disparities, which is a combination of push and pull factors. Also, moreover, the communications revolutions have broadened the awareness of opportunities in developed Europe, which has been facilitated by relatively easy and fast transportation networks. One of the fundamental challenges of the politics of immigration in Europe has been the rise of right-wing populism. One of the major repercussions of this has been that it has caused a setback to the center-left consensus that has dominated EU institutions for a long time, as has been depicted recently by the British decision to exit the EU. Many right-wing parties have emerged in various countries, such as the League and Five Star Movement in Italy, Alternative for Germany in Germany, Vox Party in Spain, National Rally in France. The vote bank of these parties have been mainly based on anti-immigrant rhetoric, which have gained them substantial electoral dividends. These parties have been highly critical of the open door policy, which has been adopted by countries like Germany. Some of the parties have actually called for open persecution of foreigners and have accused them of subverting the European societies. The main assumptions on which they accuse immigrants is that they are considered as a threat to jobs, social welfare benefits, and culture of local people. Therefore, these parties are averse to providing equal political rights and opportunities to these immigrants. They try to arouse public sentiments against the immigrants by raising catchy slogans such as Germany for the Germans, rights for the whites. Viktor Orban, who is the Prime Minister of Hungary and a leader of far-right party, has led the bandwagon against the reallocation plan of refugees within its borders and have condemned them as poison and terrorists. Many countries such as Poland and Slovakia have also raised strong stand and considered immigration and internal security as state matters in which European Union should not play any role. In 2014, Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization in West, a far-right organization, was also founded in Germany. Again, in 2016, a Prague Declaration was signed by like-minded parties like Netherlands, Bulgaria, and Austria, in which it was feared that the history of Western civilization could soon come to an end through Islam conquering Europe. In the European Parliament also, 9 far-right parties have formed a bloc called the Identity and Democracy. These parties have mainly turned the anti-refugee sentiments into anti-immigrant sentiments and anti-EU sentiments. Their notion of nation, nationalism, and national identity is parochial in nature, and the nation that they visualize is a homogeneous entity marked by common descent, culture, and territory. They also have strong reservations about multiculturalism and the spread of Islam. The recent spate of hate crimes and terrorist attacks has been attributed to the rise of radical Islamic fundamentalism, like we saw in the 2020 Paris stabbing attack and the Sweden riots. All of this has led to a vicious circle of xenophobia, racism, extremism, and communal hatred. The right-wing parties view globalization in great disdain as because of its negative economic and cultural impact. They consider it as a roadblock in the national control of the wheels of economy and in reinforcing the traditional cultural norms and values. They also try to exploit the wide chasm that exists between the mainstream parties and citizens as they try to portray themselves as the true voice of the people. Within the literature of the politics of immigration in Europe, we also find models of national integrations that have been adopted by various countries in Europe, such as starting from the imperial model, which was practiced in British empires. Though it ensured the integration of different peoples in multi-ethnic regime, it facilitated the dominance of one social group. The next is the folk or ethnic model, which represented an ethnically homogeneous society, which was marked by common descent, language, and culture. This model resembles a very close society where immigrants are excluded from citizenship and social membership. The major debate has been between the Republican model and the multicultural model. In the Republican model, the nation is described as a political community having a constitution, laws, and citizenship. Immigrants are mainly assimilated into the society on the condition that they follow the political rules and national culture. Therefore, it entails the adoption of dominant culture on the part of the immigrant population. This is the case mainly in France. In the multicultural society, on the other hand, the political community is based on constitution, laws, and citizenship, and the immigrants are admitted to the society based on the adherence to political rules. But the major difference is that their cultural and ethnic differences are recognized. This is seen in countries like Sweden. The reality of immigration is far more complex than what the political perception offers. Like, first of all, they say immigrants are a threat to local jobs, but immigrants are not to be seen as a problem to be dealt with. Rather, they are a boon for the aging demography in Europe. They fill up for labor shortages in many countries of Europe, like Germany. Immigrants and native people, it is found that immigrants and native people, they tend to work in different sectors of labor market and they do not generally overlap. In many advanced economies, the immigrant population, they do not undercut local labor as they perform jobs at the lower rungs of the economic ladder. The economic impact of immigrants on job and wages is found to be neutral or at best positive, because with the arrival of immigrant population in the local labor market, the native workers are driven to higher skilled jobs and they get better remuneration. Secondly, immigrants are accused of threat to public resources and social benefits, but it has been found that with the coming of immigrations, the impact on economic growth is positive, as it leads to state putting additional investment for essential services like education, health, and housing. Third, the immigrants are accused of diluting the local culture, but it has been found that the culture of immigrants is seen as enriching the cultures of the host society. So on a concluding note, I would like to say the crisis of immigration, as they call it, is not something of a cross-border flows, but rather it is generated by the political crisis formed by the perception of elite and political parties of the foreign-born people. So the integration of immigration really requires walking the tightrope between EU and EU member state jurisdiction, because what the political perception seems to offer is far from reality, as immigrants, instead of being burdens, they are an opportunity for the aging European economy to take benefits from. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharat Poornima. Again, good presentation, and you've kept to the time, which makes my job very, very easy. All of them have become very self-regulated. So we have to thank Professor Sarkar for, this very wonderful opportunity of intellect with time. That's an asset in academics. Okay, so we now have the last speaker for our session. Kamini, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible? So the topic of my presentation today is the immigration in Europe from the economic viewpoint. So though the Europe has a vibrant history of immigration within the continent and from other regions, but the topic has become very controversial in recent years in the context of refugee crisis. It has flared up various debates over social, political, and economic impacts of migration over the continent. In this regard, the paper aims to research and present the economic perspectives on immigration in Europe, particularly in terms of labor supply, job opportunities, public budget, and the overall economic growth. The paper discusses how the above economic determinants have shaped the politics of Europe, especially in the backdrop of economic downturns and the recent refugee influx. So what is the economics behind the immigration? People cross borders for various reasons. These persons can be the persons looking for better jobs, higher studies, families for unification, even the forced migrants, escaping from wars, violence, and or natural disasters. So the freedom of movement is a crucial component of the current globalized international liberal order. And in the classic economic sense, it is supported by the Adam Smith theory of free trade. That allowing free movement of labor is similar to the free trade across borders that helps in developing specialization and increasing efficiency of labor. That helps in moving towards the David Ricardo's principle of comparative advantage. So various economics suggest in terms of economic migrants that international labor mobility is the consequence of wage differentials across the countries. So when we talk about the common view of negative view about the immigration, that migrants take most of the jobs of the natives, it is situated in the zero-sum situation, which is not a very healthy argument, as the immigration may also create many other jobs based on the aggregate demand factor, like it helps in increasing demand of goods and services. In fact, the impact of immigration basically depends on whether the migrants complement or substitute the job of the natives. So in terms of economic impact of immigration on EU, first we deal with the population dynamics, as it has a direct impact on the working population. As we all know that population of EU is aging rapidly, and in fact the oldest dependency is projected to double by 2060, and the working age population is going to decrease to 44% from the current 64% by 2060. This is a huge challenge for the welfare system, economic growth potential, and the employment capacity of the EU in future. As we find that all EU countries have a very low replacement ratio, to the fact that since 1990s, the population growth heavily depends on the net migration. So in this regard, the immigration can play a very big role in balancing the whole population dynamics. And various economists suggest that though immigration is not the complete solution of the EU's fiscal and population imbalances, but it is becoming increasingly significant for Europe. When we talk about the labor market, we find that there are several paradoxes. We find that there is a slow economic growth rate and as well as high unemployment rate in EU. And on the other hand, there's a labor shortage of certain skills and certain sectors, according to the European Parliament report. though freedom of movement, there is a freedom of movement of workers at the EU level, but we find that there are labor market rigidities in the member states, and many states have found that there is a meager effect of the on the effect of immigration on the native wages and employment rates. It is generally studied observed that the 10% increase in the workforce has almost only around 0.2 to 0.7% of like negative impact on the native employment rates. And in fact, some researchers find that immigration helps improve the adjustment capacity of the labor imbalances. Like it fills the jobs avoided by the natives. These are the 3Ds, the dirty, difficult, and dangerous jobs, which are mostly low paid households, informal sector jobs, seasonal employments like farming and construction. In fact, it is openly acknowledged by established studies like OECD that these sectors are actually, the immigration is a crucial factor for the survival of these sectors in the host countries. In this regard, OECD also argues that the integrating asylum seekers into the labor market is more costly than the economic migrants. So when we talk about the fiscal dimension, that is the burden on the public budget, the European Commission itself has assessed that the fiscal costs are very limited and temporary and could be easily outweighed by the benefits of integration in the medium term. And IMF also calculates that the fiscal cost related to the immigration is just equal to 0.1% of the GDP per year for the period 2015 and 17, which was a very high, which we saw very high immigration in Europe. And in fact, these fiscal measures would impact the EU GDP positively by 0.13%. So when we talk about the participation and integration of non-EU migrants, it has been difficult for non-EU migrants as compared to the non-economic migrants as compared to economic migrants. And it costs more than the economic migrants in public budgets. When we take about the general view of migrants, that they are the liability for the public finances, the various studies have found that in fact they are a very good survey. They could provide a very good solution to the sustainability of the Europe social security system in the long term through the tax contribution by these migrants if they are properly integrated in the formal sector. So when we talk about the economic growth, there have been studies. We are in general, it is as immigrants can boost the level of economic activities in the host countries as the market of these countries have been already saturated due to the high standards of living of the native population. So when the new migrants come, they create a lot of consumption demands and could create a lot of economic activities that would in turn help in boosting the economic growth of the continent. So OECD has found that the additional fiscal measures related to the asylum seekers in the period of 2016 and 17 could boost the aggregate demand of the European economies by 0.1 to 0.2% of their GDP. And in fact, in this regard, the European Investment Bank has warned the countries that any absence of proper integration could actually have an adverse effect on the GDP per capita. So when we talk about the integration, we see here we find that the status of immigrants in Europe in various states, we find that there is variation in terms of integration of these migrants. In general, the living condition of migrants is found to be much lower than the native born in several socioeconomic aspects like house ownership of foreign born, which is just 30% as compared to the natives who have 71% of house ownership. In general, they have a low median income. And in fact, 4 out of 10 international migrants are at the risk of poverty as compared to only double of native born. And if we find that immigrant women tend to have particularly low employment and activity rates in EU member states, there is also a gap of education level between EU and non-EU born population. So these gaps are a result of various factors like social and cultural differences. They also face various discriminations and also the labor market tightness, etc. So the OECD says that any failure to integrate the migrants could pose a very serious cost to the EU member states in the long term. So what is the impact of these economic determinants over the politics? We find that in recent years, there is an increasing anti-immigration political demands, which have wider implications for the larger political events like Brexit or rise of far-right parties in many European countries. Though politics of immigration is determined by various complex and multidimensional factors like social, economic, security, but the paper focuses on the economic factors. So we find that in general, anti-immigrant sentiments often combined with ethnic prejudices are heightened during the economic crisis period. So the literature supports it that the prevailing high unemployment rates and low growth has frustrated the in general population of EU, and this frustration is generally directed towards the immigrants, which are in general a minority, and this is generally covered by the scapegoat theory. In this regard, the scholars like Mullman have found that it is not the degree of competition by itself, rather the fluctuation in this competition that triggers this kind of attitudes. Like as was found that negative attitude towards immigration increased during the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, and also during the refugee crisis, as we saw that heightened anti-immigration sentiments were there. Hence, we find that economic conditions also play a very important role in the politics of immigration. So I want to conclude with the fact that unlike flow of goods of movements of people, the movement of people brings several social, political, economic consequences. And despite the general negative populist view regarding the immigration, several empirical studies have found that there is a limited impact of various economic factors. And in fact, there is a possibility that the integration of these migrants will turn into a very good opportunity. So, and the impact of the immigration vary across the member states, and that also depends on the kind of migrant that they are receiving. So, as suggested by various institutions, the successful and easy integration is very crucial to turn these possible liabilities into the assets for the Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamini. Thank you also for a very good presentation. All of you have done a very remarkable job of distilling the main points in your papers. And we have a good 20 minutes for a good discussion. We've also got questions on the side. I'm just going to take 3 or 4 points which have come from what all of you have presented and put it out there, and then we can knit it all together. First point, since we're looking at the securitization of migration, is it's a very important factor is that there are issues in society. But when we're talking about securitization, it's about how an issue assumes first a political connotation. All movement of people is not problematic, right? But when an issue assumes a political connotation, and second, when it then starts getting perceived from a security lens. So that's very critical, and therefore you can see how, some of you have also brought out that there have been multiple waves. In fact, Europe is a destination country, has always been. That's the history of Europe. But politics at different points in time makes a group of people welcome and unwelcome. That's a very important point I wanted to underline. Second is, I think Abhishek had also pointed out the difference between, migration and refugees. It's very important not to, remove the differences, because the obligation on states under international law is very different. Refugees and those who have signed up to the Geneva Convention, makes it incumbent on the state to take the refugees, right? So that's very, very important. So we could also look at it from the point of what happens when people travel with papers. That means there is the issue of they are eligible and there's legitimacy. And what happens when people travel without papers? Okay, so this is where even as a migrant, from an economic perspective, to what Kamini was saying in the end, a person traveling with papers, eligible with a visa and all, can also go up the society, which is another point I want to draw your attention also, is to look at it in the sense of the positive. What happens when highly skilled people also go with proper documents and paper? So it's not about the negative story also all the time. In fact, one of the biggest talks in the India-EU and India's bilateral relation with Europe is also on legal movement of people. So that's very important, where we are encouraging. And then this could also be a game changer. So it's important to point out. So the illegitimate where legitimacy is lost if papers are not there, that's about the economic dimension. A third element which has also been brought out over here by some of you is on the perception of the other. As Abhishek pointed out, these are not specific, they are diverse. So the othering is not fixed. A dynamic othering also means that it allows political parties to also morph and come back on different issues. That means they can constantly pick on, now this group, Roma was a problem in the past. Today, nobody's talking about the Roma, for example. It's another group which is coming from a particular geography of the. So the difference in the securitization is people are a threat. So even in classical Cold War studies, people were a threat, but they were ideologically bound within the rubric of the state. When we're looking at securitization of migration and of refugees, the group of people now become a threat. So that's a very, very dramatic shift which is happening over here. That all of you have also, some of you have pointed out. And I think the big thing is on how perception then pushes forward the debates, because suddenly you see the talk is about the culture is going to be threatened. The othering will bring less jobs to us. And the reality is, as some of you have also brought out, that all the lower end jobs in a society, actually the local people don't want to do. So there is a moving up, a natural moving up the ladder, while the immigrants, the poorer ones, those who are going as economic workers, they are the ones filling up the lower end. So we've got two sets of issues over here. I'm going to open it up for discussion and we'll have our panelists respond. Let me quickly go over to the chat box over here and the questions we have. We have a question from Shafiq, who says, what are the key solutions in order to prevent and decrease the EU crisis regarding immigration? So he's now talking about immigration. We have Nasreen asking the question, how the research on immigration in Europe affects India, or is it helping the researchers? Okay, this is about the study of immigration. We have a question. Another question, which is from, I think, Shafiq itself. What is the, again, it's a solution to prevent. Okay, that is there. And we have one more right in the end. This is from Dhavlendu. He's saying, is nationalism always an issue of securitization, or has it become a recent phenomena? How is populism driven by nation state affect securitization in foreign policy? So these are the questions. I will have a quick, are there any more questions? Anybody else? I will give a specific question to all of you. First is to Abhishek. Where you pointed out on the securitization. Abhishek, what do you see is the big shift in the debate on securitization today than say in early 1990, when this whole notion of expanding the realm of security was coming up? I have a question then for Khushboo. You're talking about the securitization of refugees in Europe. Do you think that the EU, when it is investing so much now on the border, the attention is on preventing the people? For example, there's this deal with Turkey, that the EU is actually losing its, humanitarian approach. It is also becoming more hard, like another state, like America, like the wall going up during the Trump, So how do you see EU investing more and more on preventing the people from coming in? Is that in terms of the EU as an actor and what it projects itself as a normative? Adarsh, you were talking about, again, the same crisis, the 2015 refugee crisis. And I want to draw your attention to, how do you see that the countries, the diversity we saw in terms of the response, does it tell us also about internal stories? Because there was a very clear cleavage between the new countries post, the enlargement. The Visegrad group in particular, all are countries which joined after 2010, and the older countries. So how do you make sense of that in terms of the solidarity? Then to Sharat Poornima, she was talking on the politics, on the rise of right wing. So I would like to push you a little bit on that and ask you, how do you see this growth of right wing? I mean, it's obviously, is it a single issue cause, or do you see that there are more issues, and or is the refugee issue getting mixed up with other things? So how do you see that? And then finally to Kamini, you were pointing out on the whole issue of immigration from an economic perspective. That actually a lot of research is not being done, but one looks at a long-term view, then people who are going in, whether they're going in with papers or without papers, can one conclude that they're contributing positively to the economic health of European Union, rather than taking away, to the point was Abhishek was calling about, why should we share our welfare with the outsider? Yeah, so these are my quick questions. And if you don't...
Can I add one comment?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Yes. Okay. This is for Kamini. Kamini, in your presentation, you talked about somewhere about, the problems with the immigrants come up, especially in states where you see that there are economic problems in terms of, for instance, high rate of unemployment. So at that point of time, naturally, there's a kind of a scapegoating, and you find that people are anti-immigrant. So I would just draw your attention to the fact that if you look at the Visegrad 4, right? And if you look at the kind of anti-immigrant sentiment there is, at the same time, you look at these states now are currently the best performing states, economically best performing, very growing. They're growing very well in terms of economic growth and performance. And their unemployment rates are very low. At the same time, you have the anti-immigrant sentiment.
Yes,
so, there are these differences. So how do you respond to that? So is it really, an economic issue, or, it tends to actually sort of mix up, or at least add on the social and the political issue does become a kind of an overriding concern given the kind of narrative that has built up. So even if it makes economic sense for an aging Europe to actually look at, people from different areas of the world, it would be a very good match, for instance, what Gulshan was saying in the morning, with India with its demographic dividend and Europe aging. But it doesn't really seem, Europe doesn't really seem to be that receptive, even if it makes economic sense. And that not being receptive is linked to the kind of narrative that has built up over a period of time.
Yeah. So that's quite a bit we have now from everyone. So let's start. I think I'll propose the following. We'll go in the reverse order. Kamini, we start with you. So quick response to the questions.
Okay, so first to the Bhaswati ma'am's question, I'd say that as I pointed out in my presentation, that it's not just the economic factor. They are like the issue of migration has a very complex and multiple factors behind the anti-immigration attitudes. So in general, in particular countries, as I also pointed out, that the impact and as well as the anti-immigration attitude varies in various countries. So so this particular attitude in Visegrad 4 is generally mixed up with the identity issue, and it's a point out the back door and the front is presented as the economic issue, but the issue in these countries, the issue is majorly of the identity thing. So this is pushed from the behind. And in general, I would say that in fact these countries were the ones who received very less of the immigrants, but they have put the huge political agenda in against the immigrants. So it's more than the economics. They have a more of the cultural opposition towards the immigrants, I would say that. And for ma'am's question, I would think that this whole I would say that it's gonna be as many of the studies have found out that the question it is going to be a positive factor, if the immigrants are properly integrated. So it's that European investment banks and various World Bank and IMF all have given have made a cautious note that these immigrants can be well integrated into the society. If in the formal sector, then they can boost and they can become a very good asset for the receiving countries. So, but as we have found that many of the times there is a very slow process of integration in the labor market, and they face a lot of discrimination. So in that sense, that often the cost overcomes the benefit in the process of integration of these migrants. So if the integration policies are properly articulated, so these immigrants can actually become a very good benefit for the receiving countries. And the third question is from Shafi. So key solution, as I would say that key solution, see when the cause, as everybody has pointed out, in terms of refugees, we would say that it's because of the push factor, not the pull factor. So in this sense, the EU, because it's a humanitarian, it's the acceptance of the refugees, and it's on the humanitarian ground. So in the I'll say that in that sense that EU it can better, like best on its part, can do that better, integrate these immigrants in a good manner. And I would say that there has to be a good economic research on the topic, and it has to be like properly made in people have to be properly made aware that these immigrants can actually be as Bhaswati ma'am pointed out, that can actually be the solution for the Europe, rather than going to be a liability for the welfare system. They can actually contribute through the taxes in their security system. They can actually provide a sustainable solution to their aging population. So this was my answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we have Sharat.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. With regard to your question that you asked, whether far-right parties just focuses on single issues or there are many angles to that, I would like to say far-right parties have existed in Europe even before the refugee crisis has come to the fore. So there had been Nazism and fascist regimes in the past as well. But these right-wing parties have gone a boost from the refugee crisis they have mainly based their foundation on the notions of cultural relativism or ethnic nationalism and anti-egalitarianism. And with not just the immigration issue, they have tried to add through the immigration issues many other factors like Islamophobia, and they see the Muslim, they are very critical of the immigrants coming from Muslim backgrounds, as they are generally stereotyped as being conservative and unwilling to be integrated into the mainstream culture. Various rape crimes has been attributed to them. So they have also raised the question of the role of ethnic identity in European societies. So all of these factors have been accumulated in one on the force of the immigration issues. So not just the immigration factor, with the immigration factors, many other things are being connected like a dot. So their foundation has been resurrected through the immigration issues. Apart from that, from other factors like multiculturalism, and it has caused severe jolt to the European solidarity. But even though the right-wing populism in Europe has arisen, and it has given a rightward shift to many in many countries and the political system that was founded earlier. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We next have Adarsh.
Adarsh, unmute yourself.
Adarsh, you have to unmute.
Yeah, I have unmuted myself. Ma'am, can you repeat the question again?
What were you doing?
Nothing.
Yeah, so you should remember the question I asked you then.
Yeah, I think you asked that what is the division, the West, the solidarity movement, and what is the approach of we four countries towards the refugees, right?
I asked, like, how do you explain that? Not what is the approach, but how do you explain it when you look at Europe? Why do we see these kind of distinctions coming up?
Ma'am, when it comes to the distinction, as we all know that during the Cold War era, these countries were under the influence of the USSR. So they have, I think, the fear of self versus othering, and also the rise of right-wing political parties that have emerged after this, migration crisis or refugee crisis in Europe. So the approach of the right, they have politicized this issue. So they feel that these people, these migrant or these refugees are threat to their culture, and they have experienced in the past that they were the influence of others. So they have that fear that their culture would be destroyed by these people. So they believe in a homogeneous society. So they fear of that they will take on their jobs, they will as far as Islamic fundamentalism are concerned, they thought that the Islam is the root cause of terrorism. So they will attack us. They will create a hate society in our country. So these are the factors that these are the factors that these are the factors that uh, in that forces these countries to prevent migrants to enter their countries, I think.
Okay, so you want to also expand a little bit to look at how, the absorption of the European values.
Yeah, ma'am. Earlier, as far as the European values are concerned, they believe in democracy, they believe in rule of law, they believe in human rights, but and they have signed the 1951 Geneva Convention of Human Rights. But on the one side, they are saying that they are protecting the human rights on the human rights, democracy. They are promoting democracy throughout the country. They are protecting human rights. They are the they are the believers of human values. But on the other hand, they are not willing to accept these refugees.
Adarsh, let me interrupt, please.
Yes,
I think you're missing the point. These countries which joined later and after Cold War, the transformation in terms of the absorption of political values is much less. And so that is something which you should also examine when you're answering. Okay, when you just say that they are doing this, they are doing that, that does not answer the question. The fact is, on the ground, these countries responded very differently when the crisis took place. Yeah, so I will draw your attention to that when you are analyzing. Include that element. Okay, so we will, in view of time, I will not, take another comment from you. I'll now give it over to Khushboo. Khushboo, will you kindly go ahead?
Yes, ma'am. As you asked about me, the preventing European borders. So it's very sure that I have heard from, like I was reading when I was reading articles, I was reading that the most of the human rights agency and that even the voice was coming from the European Union, from the member state, that they're criticizing the European Union for closing its border and securitizing the border and the hard border. They are approaching the hard border approach because when European Union has a normative power in the world level, and it's very it's known for a respect for human rights and migrants, like respect for human rights and lots of if you see in that context. So it was when we see the 2014 and 15 and 16 crisis, it was sure that the EU has to take this for the security of the people. But at the end, as I want to say that because of the EU has ratified the refugee convention, you has to accept the refugee. Let's accept the case for migration. They have the different cases, but for the refugee, they have to accept. But there is no option for the EU to close the border because they have to come and they have to accept, and they have no other choices. But rather than to closing the border and securitizing the border, I'll say it needs to equal burden sharing. They have to fair burden sharing between the member states. They can also come with a proper management or proper way for the policy and as asylum application, so they can stay with the proper management. I think in that sense we need it. And as we all know, the European Union is a human right, respecting human right at the global level and human normative power at the global level. I think the EU needs to be maintained that in that order. And also there is no if they're closing the border, there is no option like that because uh, and that because European Union as a global order, like global actor in the politics, in the system, in the foreign affairs, and I think they have to maintain that now. I guess my answer is more not.
No. It's good. You're trying to show the dichotomy which is there between looking after its own people and responsibility to international law. So that's a good attempt at answering that. Abhishek, what are your final comments?
Yeah, ma'am, one of the question you asked is the securitization. What are the phenomena that are being added? So, ma'am, I will come to the point, but I have 1 minute to say another thing about what Kamini was saying. I have a comment on.
Yeah, go ahead. We are right at the limit. We are at 3:20. I have to close. Yeah.
Yeah. Ma'am, actually, this is a thing that is being repeated time and time, that Europe needs migrants because for the 3D work that Kamini said. I completely disagree with this statement. Completely disagree. In 2017, Adidas shifted a factory of footwear from Vietnam to Germany. Footwear industry is a highly labor-intensive industry, and the footwear industry is being shifted from Vietnam, a low-wage country, to high-wage country in Europe, Germany, only because of robotization. With the robotization and automation, I don't think that Europe need unskilled workers from outside the world. France is thinking to make 4 days a week. Why? Because if they don't do, their unemployment rate will shoot up. So they need workers. It is a fallacy. Even it is being repeatedly saying in India's budget, okay, that we are going to export workers. In this budget also, Finance Minister was saying that Japan want our worker. Yes, Japan want our worker, but not as permanent migrants, only for the 5 years. They will use for the 5 years and you have to return back to your own home country. So don't say that they need workers. There's automation is there. They don't need worker. Even West Asia don't need your worker now. Okay, many of these dirty, demanding jobs are being given to the robots. So look at the technology. Okay, so I don't agree that Europe need workers. Okay. So now I'm coming to my question. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah. Now I'm coming to the question that what is the securitization of the phenomenon that has been added? See, when I look at the phenomena that has been added to this question of security, I look at the two different spheres. One at the sphere of the public, okay, then it's the culture that is being a big issue. So if you go for this identity politics, that is also very taken as a security, that is a culture. Another is on the what states are doing. States are not worried about the culture; they are worried about the cyber security. Okay, so if you look this EU or any country, they are more worried about the cyber security, which is a new threat. So this is the security in its security aspect. Cyber security is being a new concept that is being added, and states are worried about that. But all for on the they're talking about the people, they are worried about the cultural issues. So and that was also the main crux of my paper, that it is a culture that become a security issue. And now I think of why culture became a security issue. I don't get much time that time, so I would like to explain this.
Abhishek, I'm sorry you can't go back to your paper now. That's the end of it.
Okay, sorry.
Good point. I would like to close. Let's keep to time because it's very important. It's a long program we have. I'd like to thank all of you for your presentations. Abhishek made a very good point, which I think should be considered by all, that how classical arguments are once again, brought back to life, this demand for labor. And he's very right to point out that technology is the game changer. Digital has shown, that it's going to transform not only the economy, but the way jobs are going to be done. The demand for even office space has suddenly transformed. You don't need office space, for example.
Yes. Now, yes.
Right? So I think we also need to look at some of the fundamental assumptions. I'd like to thank all the 5 of you.
I want to add one point.
Sorry, please. I will give back to.
We'll just, I think.
And then we will allow. Kamini, there will be no end. I'm very happy you all are very active. We will have monthly discussion groups if everybody wants it. We will start it. If all of you want it, we will do. But let us conclude here. And just let me say that good presentations, all of you kept to time, brought out your core arguments. And we can, really, all of us, I think, have benefited from what you presented this afternoon. So thank you so much. I'd like to give the mic to SN. I will give the mic to Bhashwati and she will then
okay. But you stay, don't leave the place because Bhashwati, I will ask a little time because there was a question. Actually, the question was, what is take for India? What is lesson for India from their problem, from the problem of European migration, immigration, integration and all. So the young generations people must be, conveyed. What is the difference between our society and the European society? So if I'm allowed to go further, I'll just want to have some interaction with, my observation about India and the European Union. So if you allow me, ma'am.
I think what we can do is, because we have really run out of time, and we'll start the next session at 3:30. So whoever wants to take a coffee break can take a coffee break. And SN is here to continue with the discussion. Some of us will be here and we can continue with the discussion. So we are here. Whoever wants to take a coffee break can go ahead. The session has ended, but the discussion is on.
Yeah.
Right?
All right. Okay, thank you, ma'am. I wanted to, there was a question to what is take for India? What is the lesson? How India is different from the European society? You know, I remember my school days. When I was in school, there was an assembly. There used to be assembly before the school started. Then you used to go for pray, and that was in Hindi. It was the Hind Desh ke Nivasi. सारे जन एक हैं रूप रंग वेश भाषा चाहे अनेक हैं. Basically this is democracy, diversity, multiculturalism, human rights and all, which is India. Basically in India it's where India is the land of migration. I have said in the morning that different people from Central Asia, West Asia and East Asia came to India and they settled. The basic foundation of Indian civilizations are from these migrants people. Basically, they are Dravidians, Aryans, Semitics, and Mongoloids. So these are the ethnic foundation of Indian people. What today it is being said by some people like India is a monolithic. Basically, it's wrong. Basically, India is the land of multi-ethnicity, multicultural, multi-linguistic people. So, over the years, Dravidians and Aryans, and basically Aryans was followed by Semitics, and the Semitics was followed by what you call Yuchi, Kushana, Bacterian, Shakas, Satvanas, these people in different time. Basically, they came in India, entered into territory of India, and they assimilated and integrated themselves into the soil of India. And then during medieval period, the Muslim immigrants like Uzbeks, then Turkoman, Tajiks, Iranian, Turanian, Arabs, Afghan, Pathans. These are the Muslim tribes or Muslim ethnic groups of different regions who came to India, and they contributed in making modern India. So what you see today in India is not a monolithic India. It's a basic multicultural, multi-ethnic. So everything has been contributed by these migrants who came to India. So we have assimilated over the centuries, we have been able to assimilate and integrate these people into India, and we are known as Indian, this is Indianness. There in Europe, people failed to integrate them and assimilate them. They, as you have said, they still had a feeling of we and others. So they still have the feeling, and that's why if the people are facing the problem of terrorism, Islamophobia, being the second largest Muslim population, we Indian don't have Islamophobia, the fear of Islam. So visually, we have been our leadership have been very practical in evolving the policies which will give a sense of belongingness to the nation. So we never had this problem as in European people having today. So this is a lesson. We must try to preserve our Indianness, multicultural. When we are talking, and this very conference is being organized by democracy, diversity, and the European identity in the European Union. We are really very lucky to discuss all these things, and this was information which I wanted to supply or share with you students who are basically the generation who will carry forward the Indianness further. Wish
Thank
all
you,
the
SN.
best. Thank you.
Thank you, SN. We'll start the next session now. It's 3:30. I hope everybody is there. You can go through the drill of the checks, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We will be doing a quick mic check. Rajesh, are you there? Rajesh? Poornima?
Yes, I'm here.
Arnab?
Hello, am I audible? I'm here.
Yes, you're audible. Rajesh, is your mic working?